Welcome everybody. We're so grateful to have another instance of our TIS alumni talks, a new kind of initiative that Melody and I have cooked up, and we're so grateful that we have a presenter this afternoon. I should say that originally we did plan and have advertised to have two presenters, but our other presenter had an emergency come up. Life happens to all of us, right? We really hope that we'll be able to schedule her again soon. I'm sure she'll be excited to do that. So the event will be a little bit shorter than we had originally planned. But again, welcome to all of you, students, faculty, prospective students. You're all welcome here. We will go ahead and introduce the speaker. Melody will give that introduction, but I wanted to give a little special recognition to our former director of the program. Joyce Tolliver is with us today. So thank you so much, Joyce, for joining us. We're really
I'm
glad to have you here.
so glad you're
And
doing this and happy to have been invited.
thank you. You're always welcome, always welcome. So with that, I will turn it over to Melody, who will introduce this afternoon's speaker.
Hi, yeah, thank you, Ryan. Yeah, thanks to everyone for joining us today. As Ryan mentioned, we were planning to have two invite speakers, but unfortunately, Heba couldn't be here. So we hope we can have her come back, maybe in the near future, maybe next semester. We are holding our career talks like every semester. So yeah, stay tuned. And yeah, so for today, I would like to introduce our very speaker, Razan Roumany. So thank you so much to join us. And yeah, so she's one of our accomplished alumni, and she graduated in 2022, if I remember correctly. So yeah, she ever since her graduation, she has worked as a conference and medical interpreters. So she has successfully built her career from, let's say, conference halls all the way to hospitals and the way back. Yes. So, and also I know she has been featured on quite a few podcasts, and I listened to her interviews and podcasts. It was amazing, like listening to her stories. So she there, if you feel interested, I guess maybe I can share that. So she was featured at one of the podcasts, which is called Brand Interpreter, and the other one is called Found in Interpretation Podcast. So she discussed her journey in the profession and her role of multilingualism in building intercultural understanding. And also she shared her incredible journey of a medical interpreter, a lot of wonderful stories there. And so today she will share like the day-to-day realities, challenges, and also rewards of professional interpreting. So the topic of her talk today is mental health interpreting techniques, and she will go over some various techniques she used with both adults and also children in play therapy, which might be new to some of us. And she will also discuss how mental health interpreting is different from medical interpreting in general, and how to deal with compassion fatigue. So I guess the floor is yours, Razan. Go ahead.
All right. Well, it seems since Hiba is unable to join us today, it does seem like I have a little bit more time than I initially thought. So if anybody wants to chime in, have a conversation with me, stop me, comment or questions along the way, I would be more than happy. I would be more than happy to do that. Okay, so I am here today to discuss a little bit about some techniques I have used in mental health interpreting. And like Melody said, my name is Razan. So before I begin, just a little bit about me. And Melody, you were correct. I graduated UIUC in 2022, and ever since then, I have been working with two different agencies, one of which is dedicated to helping refugees. Essentially, we provide legal services, mental health services, and more oftentimes than not, they are in need of interpreting services. And that is where I fall. That is where I come in. So here are some goals I'd like to here are some goals I'd like to accomplish today. I would like to go over some various techniques I have found useful working with adults and children in the therapy session. And then I would like to go over how to navigate compassion fatigue. So the therapy services we provide for children essentially consist of play therapy, which, like Melody said, not very many people know about this. We cannot expect a child to express themselves like we do as adults, right? We cannot expect them to express themselves like we do. Children express themselves much better through play. We have like Jenga, Uno, you name it, we have it. I cannot tell you how many times a day I play Uno. I see it in my sleep all day, every day. I play Uno and Jenga. And it's just a way to help facilitate that conversation with children. When I first meet a child, I go up to them and I say, "Hello, my name is Razan, and this is my friend," right? I don't use big words with children. Coworker, colleague. So let's just say Anne. I say, "Hello, my name is Razan, and this is my friend, Anne. Why don't you go ahead and tell them what you want to say in English or in Spanish, and how about I help you out?" And usually I get a, "Okay." And of course, I tailor this introduction to be age appropriate. When I give this introduction, the therapist already knows what I'm saying. Why? Because I have communicated with that beforehand. They know my introduction. Communication with the therapist is absolute key. I cannot emphasize how important communication with the therapist is. Personally, like the therapist, they have my number, and I will text them and I will be like, "Hey, are we going to do the scared evaluation today?" The scared evaluation is what we use to assess a child's anxiety level. Essentially, that's what we use essentially. And if, I'll get a response back saying, "Yep, this is the evaluation we're going to use." And so before the session, I already have it pulled up in Spanish and in English. That has saved me a lot of time. It saved me a big headache. You, as an interpreter, have to communicate those needs. I oftentimes, this is a very common thing I hear. I hear this so much that an interpreter must remain invisible. That if they forget that you're there, it is a good thing. There is a time and place for that. I do not disagree. However, as the interpreter, you also need to speak up and communicate your needs. I tell people all the time, I'm not a human Google Translate. When something isn't flowing properly, when there's been a misunderstanding, I tell my colleagues, don't just watch disaster unfold. You need to communicate what's going on. You need to communicate your needs as an interpreter. Help me help you kind of deal, right? With these assessments, they're very difficult questions to answer. Your children tend to feel intimidated when, they might feel intimidated with two adults talking to them. And there can be very intimate, difficult questions to answer. And so if there's anything I've learned interpreting in this field, it is that it is okay to sound human. It is okay to show your humanity as an interpreter. Now, obviously, I'm not saying, change the content of, what we call we're not changing the content of what is being said. We're not adding, we're not subtracting. But oftentimes, like for example, most days I am working when I'm in a clinic. If I'm working at a clinic, I'm most likely in a labor and delivery unit. That is where I spend the vast majority of my time at a clinic. And believe it or not, we have very young people coming in. We have 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, and they come in scared. I work pre-op, which is preparation for before surgery. You have young children coming in at the age of 9, 10, coming in getting surgery, and they come in and they're nervous and they're scared. And adults are towering over them, speaking in a language they don't really understand very well. And I can't imagine how scary that must be. So, whenever I deal With a child, I try to look relaxed, I smile. It is okay to show human emotion within reason. We can't change anything, but it is okay to look relaxed, to sound comforting. At the end of the day, we're dealing with children. We're dealing with vulnerable people in the mental health setting. Here and here is a very useful technique I have found, and I use this all the time. Children do not really know how to utilize an interpreter very well. Most children do not. And so, more oftentimes than not, the child will just start speaking to me. And like I had a little boy who during the session looked at me and was like, "Oh, how old are you?" And so this is how I personally deal with that situation. So let's just say the boy asks me in Spanish, "How old are you?" I actually mumble to myself in English and I go, "How old am I?" And then I answer in Spanish. So now, because I mumbled the question the boy said to myself in English, the therapist now knows so I'm not just speaking to someone in Spanish and leaving the therapist out. So anytime, and that goes for adults too, if an adult, that they ask me, a question like, "Oh, how long have you been doing this? Do you have kids?" I mumble that question under my breath in English, and I let the therapist intentionally hear, and I do that on purpose so that the therapist can hear and understand what the question that is being asked. So when I do answer in Spanish, at least they know what we're talking about. Transparency is very important, and you do not want to leave a party out. So key considerations for interpreting for adults. One of the most important things is the seating position. I had a I had a session where the therapist was sitting in the middle, I was sitting on the right, and the client was sitting on the left. And the entire time, the client was going like this. And I ended up having to suggest a change in the seating arrangement because going like this for 1 hour is not a good thing. So we had to change the seating position. I always make it a point to show up in person, always, even if I have an option to do it virtually. If it is within driving distance, if it is a reasonable distance, I will go there. It makes my job a lot easier. A lot of my colleagues really dislike the virtual, what we call the VRIs, the OPIs, the interpreting over the phone, over video. And I get it, it's challenging. Sometimes you're interpreting over the phone and there's a baby crying in the background, or there's a muffling sound, and you hear 500 things at the same time, and it can get challenging. I get it. But in the mental health field, this can actually really come in handy. I had one of my therapist colleagues text me and was like, "Hey, this client's a little bit shy. Do you mind turning off your camera for the session? I want them to feel like they're directly talking to me more. Can you turn off your camera?" And the good thing about interpreting virtually is that I can sit here and I can turn off my camera, right? You obviously cannot do that in person. I can't just sit here. I can't turn off my I can't turn off my camera in real life, but I can do it right now, right? So that I think is a very positive thing. So adults, it is difficult to get a child or a teenager to open up to you. It takes time for them to feel comfortable. And once they get comfortable, they might open up a little bit to you, from what I've noticed. Obviously, there are exceptions. There are many exceptions. There is individuality, but adults tend to spill their hearts more. It is easier to get them to spill their hearts and talk more, because typically they're there by their own will, their choice. With a teenager, people suggest that they take therapy, or the school suggests that they go to therapy, or their parent, mom and dad, want them to go to therapy. But adults, typically, if they go, typically they want to be there, so they will spill their hearts and they'll talk and they'll talk. And this is why I say that communication with the therapist is key. I had a client who was ranting for 5 to 6 minutes. She spoke for a very long time, and she was talking about how this country is different. She doesn't know the language, the food, she's not used to the food. She doesn't know anyone here, for 5 to 6 minutes. And when the therapist thought that she had spoken for long enough, she would actually go like this, and she would, let's let the interpreter, let's let the interpreter interpret. And I had to communicate afterwards, not in a, okay, this is what we're going to do, I know better way, but in a more of a suggestive, let's let them, even if they speak for a very long time, let's let them finish. A part of my job, yes, is to be accurate. I agree. That is very important. However, the part of my job as a mental health interpreter is also to keep the conversation flowing. If you keep asking for clarification on details, you will end up ruining the flow of the conversation. And I hope that makes sense. If you're constantly like, oh, I'm sorry, what did you say? Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that little it ends up, you're ruining the connection between the therapist and the client. So for me personally, I try my best not to ask for repetition unless I absolutely need to. If somebody is telling you, one of the most traumatic things that's happened to them, it can be incredibly awkward, to say, hey, can you say that for me one more time? Do you mind repeating that for me one more time? It can be incredibly awkward and very inconvenient. Sometimes if you absolutely heard nothing, sometimes you have to do what you have to do, but it's incredibly awkward. So asking for repetition is one of the last resorts, one of the last things I tend to resort to. But that's not to say that accuracy isn't important. Of course it is. But if somebody, let's just say they were talking for 10 minutes and now you have to give a 10-minute rendition, and let's just say you forgot, little details here and there. I would let it go. You have to keep the conversation moving back and forth. This is very different than in the medical setting. The medical setting is not a therapeutic relationship. If the if the patient is listing their symptoms, for example, if they tell you, I've been having tightness of the chest, I have trouble breathing, my fingers are turning purple, I have trouble walking up and down the stairs. Every single one of those symptoms is very important. If you forget one symptom, that can be extremely problematic. One symptom, one word, as dramatic as it sounds, can change the entire course of the conversation. And it's the same way in mental health interpreting. Accuracy is important, I agree. The other day, I was interpreting for a lady. This was a therapy session, and she casually mentioned, and this was her last sentence. Her last sentence was, oh, and my son said the other day that he was like thinking about killing himself or something, like just casually. But what if and that was just like the last sentence. What she was saying before had nothing to do with that. And then she just hit that last sentence with that. She just hit us, with that. And that was her last sentence. But what if I would have summarized that? What if I would have left off that last sentence? That last sentence right there changed the entire course of everything. And the therapist started asking her questions about it, and she said, "Oh, no, 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 no. He's not going to do it. He's all talk." And the therapist was like, "Okay, maybe, but what if he's not though? What if I, as the interpreter, just went, it's just one sentence, but what if he wasn't kidding? That would have had catastrophic mistakes. So accuracy is very important." So compassion fatigue. This is something very, very common people suffer from when working in the mental health field. When you work, I help facilitate group therapy sessions for inmates. I work in therapy sessions. In healthcare, you hear a lot of sad things. Compassion fatigue is going to happen, I think. And something I've heard, and I've heard several people say this, to keep work at work. Right. I think a lot of us have heard that, you once you leave, once you go out that door, you leave work at work, which I agree to an extent. So I agree and I disagree. So we do need emotional boundaries. Right. So as selfish and as terrible as it sounds, I personally cannot be the bearer of everyone's pain, nor do I have the emotional capacity to do that. That would not be healthy. I cannot pour from an empty cup. So we do need to have those emotional boundaries. And at the end of the day, their crisis cannot be my crisis. So we do need to have those emotional boundaries. But on the other side of the coin, we do carry things with us. We are only human. Sometimes, once you've had a very heavy session, you can't just turn off your brain, go home and act like nothing happened. You need time to process that. And I let myself process that. You know, you need to do whatever you need to do to process that and let it go. The thing that keeps us going, I would say, is the hope that we see, the resilience. You see incredible resilience of people who have gone through excruciatingly difficult thing. That is what keeps us going. And in this type of work, you have to have a sense of purpose. If you do not have a sense of purpose, you will not be able to do this work. I do not want to sell or over romanticize my job. Some days are very, very hard. It is hard working in the labor and delivery unit and seeing someone in physical pain. It's very hard seeing somebody in a lot of physical pain, emotional pain. Unfortunately, when I interpret for someone, not all the time, but a lot of the time, they're in pain, whether it's emotionally or physically. And it is hard to witness another human being, especially a child, go through something very traumatic, to have that amount of pain. It is very hard. And I'm going to be very, very honest. Some days I'm like, I would literally rather have any other job right now. It is hard watching a child go through pain. But, during those very, very hard days, during those sessions that are very emotionally taxing, we have to hold on to our sense of purpose. You have to have a sense of purpose and you have to have a why and know why you do what you do. And that is what I think the most important thing. And that is the key, I think, um, and that is the key to helping compassion fatigue, I think. So I think that is about all I have for you. I would love to answer any questions, unmute your mic if you want to ask me any questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Razan, so for
Yeah.
the very insightful talk. And yeah, that's very, very amazing. Thanks. And I really like the part you mentioned about mumbling to yourself, like when you are interpreting
Mhm.
for the
Yeah,
kids.
yeah.
That's a very smart way, very clever way to keep the transparency with the therapist, right? Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah. Okay, so now it's time for questions for the discussions. Feel free to shout or raise your hand.
I've got one.
Easton, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Click, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
So also thank you so much for speaking. This was a really good talk. And it was only 30 minutes, but it's pretty inspiring what you do. Sounds like a very interesting career path too. So the biggest question for me is I have a undergraduate bachelor's in communication.
Mm.
It's just that broad communication degree. If that's what you had, which I'm sure it's not, what path would you take from there to at least take a step further in that field? Would it be studying a specific language or kind of going for a master's degree? It's kind of just what would be the next step because I don't know a lot about this field at all, so I'm just
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. So I would say that depends on where you are at the moment. So for example, if you want to be a Spanish interpreter in the mental health field, first and foremost, you need to make sure you have solid Spanish skills. And if you
Mhm.
feel like, okay, my Spanish, for example, needs a little bit of work, I need to practice, then I would go ahead and enroll in Spanish courses. There are mental health interpreting courses that teach you protocols. If you just want to be a mental health interpreter, I honestly don't believe. Now, obviously, any knowledge, any degree is not a waste of time. Never a waste of time to get a degree, I don't believe. Knowledge is never a waste of time. But if your goal is to be a mental health interpreter, it is not absolutely necessary to get a master's if that's what you want to work in. It's not necessary to get a master's to be able to work as a mental health interpreter. Of course, it always helps. It makes,
Mhm.
it's very nice. It makes, more hireable. I think it gains, there are benefits, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary. There are a lot of, what do you call it? Like professional development with like on LinkedIn, I get together with we just have these sessions where we talk about, different things in what we do, and professional development on link. There's literally a lot on LinkedIn. So there's so many things you can do for self-development. That's where I would start. And I
Awesome.
hope I answered your question.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Ethan, and for your response, Razan. So I think we have a request from the chat. So I don't see your name there. It's an email address from Midbury. Oh, feel free
Yeah.
to go ahead.
This is Judith. I don't know how to change my name on the
Yeah, no worries. Go ahead.
So I had a similar question, but it's maybe a
Mhm.
little different. How did you end up doing mental health interpreting? Because it seems like it's a type of community interpreting, and it seems
Yeah.
like it's also a type of medical interpreting. Did you get certified in medical first and then jump into this, or can you tell me a little bit more about your story and how you ended there?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I got certified as a medical interpreter. So I ended up getting a job working with an agency, and I get sent out to clinics. And I also found this other agency. This is a local agency in my city, and they help refugees. And so I liked their mission, if you will. That's what they do. They hired a bunch of lawyers, therapists, and essentially what they do is they try to help out refugees. And I saw that they were hiring interpreters, and I've always liked the mental health field. I think mental health is fascinating. So that is why I decided to do what I do.
Thank you.
Maribel, do you have a question? You are muted.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, please. Well, talking about thank you so much for your presentation. I love, it's very, very good, very detailed. My question is regarding because I am taking a course now, and in
Mhm.
this course, we have to read all these ethics, code of ethics, and
Yeah.
it's some kind of contradictory that we can have, or the interpreter can have these side conversations when we don't have to do that and avoid in certain moment. So for me, it was contradictory because what happens if I see something is wrong, something that can affect the other person? And you were very clear, but how do you manage that code of ethics?
Yeah, so when you say affect the other person, it depends. If somebody is in danger to themselves or others, if somebody can get hurt, then ethically we need to speak up. So it depends on when you say harm. So it is a very it's a very difficult question to answer because it is so situational. Me and my colleagues, they were actually debating, and they were saying, well, what if, you didn't have time to give your intro and to tell them that, hey, everything you say, I'm gonna interpret everything you say, and then they end up saying something bad about the patient under their breath. Do you interpret that or not? And some people say, I had some of my colleagues that were passionately like, yes, we're interpreters, you say everything. And then people were like, no, but we didn't tell them, we didn't give them our spiel. We didn't tell them, that, hey, I'm going to interpret, so it was this back and, ethics is not necessarily a black and white thing. The one thing I will suggest is that, and I tell my colleagues all the time, like, use your common sense and do what you can at that moment. Does that make sense? Do whatever you think is, use your judgment, ask yourself, is somebody actually in harm? What are the risks? What are the pros and cons? If they are in danger, if there is any risk that they could hurt themselves physically, if it is, something, if they're, a harm to themselves or others, if something could have big consequences, I would go ahead, take, like I said, take up space as the interpreter. Again, we're people, right? We're not AI. We're human beings. You take up space and you need to speak up as an interpreter sometimes.
And this is another idea. Thank you so much. What happens if the person said you something that you need to tell the other person, but she said or he said, I don't want you to say that.
Yeah, yeah. So and again, this is my personal opinion. To me, I would tell the person, I apologize, but unfortunately, as the interpreter, I'm required to interpret everything, and then I would go ahead and say it and that is very easier said than done. All the time they tell us as the interpreter, as interpreters, they tell us all the time, no, you need to interpret everything no matter what. But as the interpreters, if um, I've heard this political. I have a colleague of mine who works in politics, and she was like, "Well, I look stupid half the time. I have to." Sometimes make them look a little bit smarter because then I look stupid, right? Then I look dumb. And that is a valid concern. We're dealing with human beings and I get, when people hear something they don't like, I get some of the heat sometimes, even though I'm just the messenger. So my solution would be to say it just as gently as possible, like, hey, I really do apologize. But unfortunately, I do have to inform the other party about what you said because I can't have them, I don't want a side conversation and the other person not be aware of what's being said. So I would just try to do my best in that situation.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Those are the tough situations, context, right? Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I have a question. You mentioned something, Razan, about telephone interpreting and video interpreting, and in this kind of era that we live in, and telecommunications being so easy and fast, and um, I think we're all aware of what might be kind of missing in those kind of communications, but I wonder if you have any thoughts on how you salvage a situation like that. I know it's not preferable, but when it's incumbent upon you to interpret in those kinds of situations, do you have any thoughts on how to make it better? Is it irredeemable? Etc. Thank you.
Yeah. That's actually an excellent question. So when I interpret over the phone, the first thing I say immediately is, please make sure that the phone is on speaker and in a position where all parties can hear. Believe it or not, people will actually they'll go like this and pass the phone back and forth. Or they'll have a phone sitting closer to one person than another, and I can hear one person and I cannot hear the other person. If there is, let's just say, a baby in the background, you need to, the interpreter hears something in the background, the interpreter cannot hear properly. And that's really all you can do. But no, like I am on an emergency team, and every now and then I interpret for the police. We have this on-call demand system on the phone, and I've gotten phone calls at 4 a.m. because police they were called on scene to a very urgent situation, and they don't have time to put in a request for an interpreter in the system and then wait for someone to get there. They don't have time they can't wait for you to get there. They need someone absolutely right now. Like I got a call at 4 a.m. Because this woman was severely beaten up. She was horrifically, it was a very horrific case, and she was beat up, and they were trying to understand what was going on, and they couldn't, and they had to immediately call an interpreter. So it comes in handy. We have to do what we need to do, and we have to utilize the tools we have.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Razan.
Uh,
Maria, you have
Then,
one question, right?
oh,
Go
Yes,
ahead.
hello. Good afternoon. I actually have two questions.
Mhm.
The first one, so in your experience, in your field experience, how frequent or common is that a therapy session is requested to be interpreted? Like, is there like a specific accreditation? We as interpreters will need to work on something to be able to interpret sessions. This is very new to me.
Mm.
For sessions, I have heard a couple of times that social work cannot be interpreted, and they had to search for a social worker that actually speaks Spanish, which is my parent language.
So sorry, I'm not sure I'm following. You said they told you that a social worker was not allowed to interpret?
No, me as an interpreter,
Mm-hmm.
they would not have an interpreter for social work services for a student. I work in school,
Mm-hmm.
so social services needed to be provided to a student. And so the administration said, we cannot do this the social worker needs to be a Spanish speaker. So that was something new to me. So for us as interpreters, is there a specific permit or training credentials that I will need to get in order to say, in order for me to say, yes, I'm qualified to be in the middle of a session because of the level of confidentiality and information that it's being exchanged?
Yeah, yeah. I think it all comes down to, I think it all comes down to education and, educating people on, even though let's just say the therapist knows a little bit of Spanish or is conversational, why it is still sometimes necessary to have an interpreter, in the room. We're not just bilingual people. We're trained in memory retention. We know how to do, not all, unfortunately, and this is very unfortunate. I know a lot of mental health interpreters who don't know how to do consecutive interpreting very well, or they're not trained in it. I think that is very unfortunate. I think all mental health interpreters should have a strong foundation and know how to do specifically long consecutive very, very well. And that's why I think the master's degree that I did really, really, really helped. I don't think I would have learned how to do consecutive. And, I've had a therapist say, like, that is so interesting. I didn't know you guys took notes. Like I had no idea. So it's education saying, hey, this is why interpreters are necessary. I think it comes down to education.
Yes, thank you. Uh, can
I have a
I
follow-up
ask my
question now
second
that you brought up
question?
notes. Oh, sorry. Somebody else is first.
No,
Go
it's fine,
ahead.
it's fine. It's just a second question. So what do you believe is the difference in between interpreting a single assignment through an agency and a hospital and the training needed, or if you have been in a situation or if you know a college that is an in-house interpreter, for example, in a hospital?
So I'm not sure I'm following that question. So you said if I know of any in-house interpreters?
Yes, and if so, where would be the difference? So my only experience interpreting for hospitals is through an
Mm-hmm.
agency.
Mm,
And but sometimes I I found a few hospitals that have the interpreter
I see what you're
position
saying.
as the in-house. So how would that, I mean, I don't know
Yeah.
if you have experience or know someone. My only question would be that difference in between working through an agency or being in the house.
In-house. I actually love that question, and thank you so much for asking that question. And here is the difference. It really boils down to your lifestyle preferences. Some people, like for the agency I work with, they really get annoyed at the fact that they have to go to like 4 to 5 different clinics a day. They find it annoying. Right. And they're like, I hate this. I'm at this clinic. I'm at this clinic in the morning, and then I have to go to this appointment in the afternoon. And they do not like that lifestyle. Other people, they like that change up, and I have a colleague who was like, I don't mind driving that long. I just listen to a podcast. I like being in different clinics all the time. It's stimulating. I love it. But what you're talking about, the agency is more freelance, or typically they are, from my experience. You get to decline or accept assignments, and some people like that. And like for example, that might be great for, let's just say, a busy mother, right? Who needs that flexibility, who can't, always work an 8 to 5, right? She needs certain hours of the day to be with her children. So her saying like, oh, look, I can only work from, 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. today. Sometimes that is a good thing for some people's life. Some people like that, need that for their lifestyle, and other people like a sense of security. And I know that I don't have to anxiously sit here and wait for my next assignment and wonder, how many assignments am I getting, with freelance demand, supply and, they go up and down. Some months it's absolutely crazy in the labor and delivery room and labor and delivery room, and some months it's quiet. Some people, I would say, they love that stability of being an in-house interpreter because you're just a staff interpreter waiting at the hospital. And if you're a staff interpreter waiting at the hospital, let's just say your patient doesn't show up, no problem. You go back to the interpretation room, you put on a headset, you take some phone calls. So you're there all day regardless. So some people they love that. Whereas freelance, unfortunately, sometimes I drive to the clinic. Oh, your patient's a no-show. I just come back. Right. So some people hate that. So I would, bottom line is it really boils down to your lifestyle preference.
Thank you so much, Razan and Maria. So Renato, you have been waiting patiently, so please
Yes,
go ahead.
I'm a little bit biased, but I basically want to compliment Razan in how much she developed. She took all the interpreting classes in our
Thank you
master's
so much.
program. Okay, I remember Razan in the very first class in community interpreting, right? From absolute scratch. And I'm very happy she mentioned note taking because we don't have a class on mental health interpreting. You won't find that in any master's program. What we train you is to be an interpreter. And I think that's what she experienced, right, Razan? You were trained to be an interpreter. She was, sounds like I'm blowing my own trumpet. She was my student in the 3 interpreting classes. And I love to see the results today. She was very reticent in using Arabic, although she's a heritage speaker of Arabic. And I pushed her a lot for Arabic, and I see that she now introduces herself as Spanish and an Arabic interpreter. Of course, Spanish will be more common depending on where you live.
Yeah,
But just to close it, I see that she learned that interpreting is the profession of the uncontrollable and unpredictable.
100%.
We never know what's coming our way. So I'm really happy, Razan, to see how you developed and you went after things that were interesting for you.
Well, I just wanted to say that actually most of my note-taking skills, I actually learned from Dr. Pagura, the foundation in simultaneous, the note-taking. Most of that I got my training from Dr. Pagura, and I think he did, obviously an amazing job. Otherwise, I wouldn't be where I am today. It is really, it's like, is it possible, this is kind of a weird analogy, but is it possible to get fit on your own at home? Yeah, absolutely. But it is easier if you have a trainer in a controlled environment that, sets things for you, that shows you the way, that guides you. And that's what a master's program does, in my opinion. And that's why I'm very thankful, and that's why I'm very thankful I did what I did what I did. And no, he's right. I was very hesitant, as heritage Arabic speakers. Oftentimes our standard Arabic, we grew up speaking dialects, and our standard Arabic, our proper pure Arabic is not that great. And I was very scared to dive into Arabic, but Dr. Ferger gave me some confidence, and I began diving into it. So.
That was by default. I was the only one in the program, so to teach interpreting, she had not much of a choice.
Yeah, so now we have a few more faculty members in interpreting on Zoom, Sophie, yeah, quite a few. I guess we have answered Simon's question in the chat, right? Okay, thank you. Okay.
Was somebody raising their hand?
Sophie?
So it's sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. Fadas?
Firdaus? I was just
Firdaus.
asking if there was another woman raising her hand before me or not.
I didn't see anyone. If someone raised their hand, please just shout out. I didn't see that in my screen. Looks like no. So go ahead.
I saw Sophie's hand, but she may have changed her mind.
So thank you, Razan, for your presentation today. I have 3 points. One of them is a point and 2 are questions related to
previous points that you have discussed with other audience members. And just to introduce myself, I'm a Moroccan visiting international ESL teacher in Karabusi, in Savoy, Illinois. And I'm interested in the program. I'm still trying to figure out the possibilities of how I can be a future student. And my linguistic combination would be Arabic, English, French, and willing to add Spanish to that. But I need to take Spanish classes for sure. So related to that, my first question would be if I would want, because the only degree I got, the only bachelor degree I got is in English studies, and the master degree that I have was a teacher training. So would I need a degree in Arabic or in French to be able to do Arabic, English, French, English translation? My second question is also related to employability, related to the language itself, to Arabic. I know that the Spanish-speaking community in Illinois is bigger than the Arabic speaking community, but just what do you think from what you see or from your colleagues or friends, the employability of Arabic speakers? And then also because I was doing research before making a final decision whether to enroll in this program or not, and especially I was comparing the employability or the prospects of linguistics to those of translation, even though my interest is really clear that I would like to be a translator interpreter. And it looks like, especially with the rise of machine translation, it is really hard and challenging to find a job as a translator interpreter. Especially one of the things that I found is that you need to have a degree if you're doing, you need to do specialized translation, and second, you need to have a degree in the area you're specializing in. So for example, if you want to do legal, you have to be like already in the field. So as a teacher, probably that tells me that I can only do interpreting in like education settings. So these are the questions, and then I can say the other points, just not to make it more confusing.
Sure. If you want to work in community interpreting, if you and underline and you feel like you have solid, because you said you're Moroccan, so I'm assuming you know standard pretty well.
Yeah.
Right.
I
Unlike
can
us second generation Arabs. So if you feel like you have, so you're an A, as we say, right? So if you feel like you're a native, you can speak standard on a native level, and you feel like, you have solid French skills, I would not necessarily waste my time on a course that teaches you the language itself. Does that make sense? In community interpreting, I would never ever use standard. I use dialect. If I were to use standard in the therapy session, that's going to create distance between me and the clients. It's going to sound overly formal. Does that make sense? Nowadays, we only hear standard Arabic and like on the news, the newspapers. No, if you want to work as a simultaneous interpreter, that's different. I would say it's hard not to, you're not going to get far if you don't know standard Arabic. But in community interpreting, it's completely, the opposite. I would say, from my experience working in mental health, really, really hit dialect hard, because I've had, I have a lot of Iraqi clients, and I had this one complaint. Oh, her dialect, I don't understand it very well. And so, that made me reflect and say, okay, so I need to either use the words in their dialect, or I need to speak a little bit more neutrally. Knowing Iraqi words, I've learned, like I've had to go online and watch, tons of Iraqi videos to try to learn the words they use, their colloquial way. You're going to get clients from Syria, from Iraq. So being familiar, obviously you can't know every single word from every single dialect from every single country, but if you can hit those main words, like what's the well-known, what are some well-known slang words people use in Iraq? What are those commonly used slang words, from Iraq, Syria? Knowing the gist of these slang words and how people speak, the dialects, I think that is the most important.
Yeah, of course. I would for community, I would use the dialect, and even if Moroccan is not as like different from like Middle Eastern or the Gulf languages, but it's easier for us since we were exposed for a long time to their dialect.
Yeah.
So it's easier. I
Yeah.
can try to speak Lebanese, Syrian, Egyptian, but of course, standard Arabic, that would be for like formal conferences or for written translation.
Yeah, and let me speak on behalf of all of us Levant region Arabs. When I say that, if you speak in Moroccan Arabic, I promise no one's gonna, unless they're Moroccan, they're not gonna understand you. You guys
Yes.
understand us. There's this, we always joke that you guys understand us, but we don't understand you. Our dialect is very known in the Arabic world, in the Arab world, whereas your dialect is, not as well known. So I would not speak in the Moroccan dialect to a client. I would speak not in standard, but in a neutral dialect. I don't know if I hope I'm making sense.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And then more in a neutral way that doesn't sound overly formal.
So you said that we don't necessarily need a degree in French or Arabic to do community interpreting. But
No.
what about the other types of interpreting or translation?
Yeah, if you can get a degree or take courses in interpreting that teach you interpreting itself, right? Note taking and ethics, that goes a long way. That goes a long way. That will definitely benefit your career. When you collaborate with colleagues, when they give you advice, when they teach you ethics, how to take notes, the do's and don'ts of note taking, that is 100% beneficial. So that is what I would invest my time in.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thanks. We learned some new about Arabic language. Thanks.
Melody,
Renato,
can
I
I?
think you have a lot to share. You have something to share as
Yes,
well.
I'm a little bit anxious here because of a misconcept that someone or a group of people told you that as an interpreter, you would have to have a degree in the topics you are interpreting. That couldn't be further from reality and truth.
I agree.
Because as interpreters, we work with tons of different topics from one week to the other. So you can't have a degree in everything you interpret. I've done environment several times, and I've done oil drilling in the North Sea and parking automation in shopping malls. So I've for several years in my life, both here and in another country, I've been a court interpreter, and I'm not a lawyer. So one thing you learn as in an interpreting training program, you learn how to learn, because no one is a specialist in every topic. And just complimenting, but Razan has already said that you don't need a degree in any language. You come from ESL and applied linguistics. That's exactly where I come from. Although I've been an interpreter since the 20th century, but it doesn't mean you can only interpret in education. Actually, I don't remember ever interpreting in an educational setting. And I've been as I said, I've been a conference interpreter for almost 40 years. So I don't have a degree in all the topics I've done. So nothing could be more contrary to fact than this idea that someone gave you. And that's what Razan, for instance, never had a class in healthcare interpreting, but she learned how to learn. And that's what she did. Okay.
I got this idea from ChatGPT.
Yes, and don't think AI or Chat GPT or whatever is ready to replace us. I think we will still be needed for quite some time. I doubt a therapist will want IA, or a judge in any court of law will want AI to interpret for a court procedure.
Thank you for answering my
Thank
questions.
you so much. Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Renato. Patricia, your hand is on.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you, Razan, and hello. I hope you're doing well. But I also wanted to support what Ronaldo just said, but to say that it also applies to translation. So There is no requirement that you have to have a degree in some kind of legal field to be a legal translator. There's no requirement that you have to have any kind of healthcare degree to do healthcare interpreting. Obviously, you don't have to have a psychology degree to do mental health translation or interpreting. And as Ronaldo pointed out, what we train people to do in this program is we teach you to learn, right? How do you prepare yourself to either translate or interpret in certain domains? And that's what we help you figure out.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. We have one or two, actually it's much longer than we planned, but that's awesome. So we just, there's one more question in the chat. It's from Ethan. Besides interpreting into health fields, what are other good options or paths to go into the workforce? So I guess maybe it
I
has
think
been
they
partially
actually
answered.
answered it already,
Yeah,
but
they have.
if she has,
Yeah.
if you have anything to add to that, I think it's been answered like 3 times. So
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. Thanks. Okay, I guess we can conclude the talk today. Thank you so much, Razan, for such a very engaging and also thought-provoking conversation and talks. Thanks a lot. We had a long conversation today, and I hope you have thanks a lot. You have a lot to take away. And thank you. Thanks to everyone for attending the talks today, and thanks to our faculty members who show up today to support. Okay, enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Yep, bye.
thank you.
Thank you, Razan.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye. Thank you, Razan.